Richie.
Hi, Sin.
Hi, everyone. And welcome to What, Where, Why? Enemies of Bloodborne, Episode 50, The Winter Lanterns.
Ooh, the big 5-0.
Yes, and Richie, could you elaborate on what, where, why is? What's going on here? Why is there a random 50 next to it?
Okay, so What, Where, Why is a series that we do mostly for Patreon. It's like a bonus thing, but we sometimes release them on the channel. So that's why if you're watching this on the channel, everything is out of order and there's some numbers that don't appear. We've decided, like before we recorded it, that we would put 50 on the channel.
Yes.
Because it's like a big important one, yeah.
And can you tell us why is it so big and important?
Because it's the Winter Lanterns.
The Winter Lanterns.
Yeah, the one everyone was obsessed with for ages. What does it mean?
And didn't you have an episode on the Winter Lanterns?
Yeah, it was wrong though. It was before the DLC came out, and we didn't know about Maria or anything. Yeah.
So now is your chance to rectify all your wrongs.
I did that though. I did that when the DLC came out.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess people could just watch that.
Don't. It's fucking awful.
And Winter Lanterns were recommended by a few people, including Hypersleep, Derek, Avalon Revolver.
Thank you.
Thank you. So now, Richie, tell me, what are the Winter Lanterns?
Well, so the Winter
I just had a vision.
Go on.
The Winter Lanterns.
Yeah.
Are the prototype of the Winter Soldier.
They've done a lot of revisions then, because it's really unrecognizable.
Yeah, that's it. I just pictured like the Winter Lanterns and the Avengers, just like fighting alongside Captain America. It's really cool.
So the Winter Lanterns are...
Yes.
They are... the body of them from the... God, it's so hard to describe. From the neck to the hips, it is the doll, right? Complete with the doll's clothing, but it's all red and stained with blood. The head is a gigantic brain that is covered in eyes. It looks a lot like the Mensis brain. The hands are the doll's hands, but they're covered in these like fleshy growths, as though the brain has grown down kind of into the body of the doll. And the legs are just like the tentacles of the brain. It has tentacles like the Mensis brain. It's them sort of twisted into leg shapes. And it can also grow arms out of the side of the head. So when it wants to attack you or grab you or something, these hands just, they're not, you don't normally see them. They just emerge from the sides of the brain and they'll kind of try to grab you and swat you and things. And its method of attack, there's two methods of attack. The method of attack that we're interested in for this discussion is that it will grab you and then the bottom of the brain will sort of peel up. It's sort of like lips parting. And then underneath that are tons and tons of little tiny mouths, like separate mouths, that will then sort of like start just gnawing at you. So they're a very odd creature that it's the shape of its body is sort of constantly changing.
And they also have tentacles, right?
Yeah.
Around somewhere, like around, I guess, their neck or coming out of the brain, or...
Yeah, they're covered in tentacles. And the tentacles also sort of go down into the body parts of the doll. So you see, like, the ball joints, but they'll have the tentacles sticking out of them.
So we talked about the research hall patients, right?
Yeah.
and they have giant heads with like cloth or something covering it.
Yeah.
Do you think that their heads look like the Winter Lantern brain underneath the cloth?
I don't know. I think the issue with that, firstly, is that the Winter Lantern's head is made of messengers. Like, it has messengers sort of fused into it.
That's right.
The
Yeah.
other issue is the Winter Lantern's brain is covered in eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the whole point of the research hall patients is that they don't get to that stage because their heads just swell up and then no eyes are formed. That's why they have like the living failures and stuff, because they never got that far.
Oh, wait a minute. But how do we know that the patients don't have eyes under their cloth?
Well, all right, they kind of might, but like the whole point of the hall is that they're slushing around the water in their head that's supposed to make the eyes appear, but it like they don't, and that's why the hall doesn't work out. And that's why you have like the woman who's outside the door saying like, Maria, I failed, because they don't get to that stage. Adeline might, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
So you think all or most of the patients in the research hall did not get to a point where they developed eyes on their outside brains, like the doll, like the
I'm
Winter
pretty sure they
Lantern?
didn't. I think that's the whole like point.
And do you think all of them would eventually turn into the living failures type deal?
I don't know if they all eventually would, but like the point of the living failures is that they kind of almost became great ones but didn't.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And if the patients did become great ones, if they did manage to transform successfully, what would they end up looking like?
Well, maybe like the Celestials or the Celestial Emissary.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking
Yeah,
too.
and because they have the giant heads, but they don't have the extra eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So the things that they do have in common with the research hall patients is that there are patients that are just a head. So
Mm-hmm.
we can kind of extrapolate from that they're just a giant brain. And those ones can produce tentacles. Like the tentacles shoot out and sort of whip around, like the Winter
Mm-hmm.
Lantern. And they can also, I don't know if it's technically a bite attack, but there's one that will drop on you and like kind of
Mm-hmm.
try to smother you by like crawling over your head. And they can also inflict frenzy on you in the same way that Winter Lanterns can inflict frenzy. But the difference there is that, and this is the other attack that Winter Lanterns do, it's the more famous one that they do that everyone hates, is that what happened, this is a deliberate thing that they do. A lot of people think it's like just a passive thing that happens if you see them, but it's not. If they catch sight of you, the brain will glow. And then when the brain glows, blood starts shooting out of your body and forming into these spears. And they're like actual spears with like rivets and things in them. They start firing out of your body. And as that's happening, it's inflicting frenzy.
So this is very reminiscent of the brain of Mensis.
Yeah, it's literally the same thing. Like, it looks the same. It's the same attack. The Mentis brain also, like, that has to be able to see you to do that attack. And there's actually a spot you can stand in on that bridge where you're somehow not in the brain's line of sight, so it will stop doing the frenzy thing and it'll just hang there as if you're not there. So it's the
So it's
same.
ignoring you.
Yeah, you can get the brain to ignore you. It's like, if anyone wants to try this, if you get really close to it when it's on the bridge and then you hug like the right hand, like the side of the cage that's facing where the choir bell is, there's like a little spot you can stand where it won't keep frenzying you, and you can just look at it with the monocular.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a ranged attack. It has to actually like willingly do that to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Richie. So you mentioned these blood spikes coming out of your body, right?
Yeah.
And there are other places that we have this attack as well.
Certainly.
Could you elaborate?
Well, Sin, the one people are probably most familiar with is um the brain of Mensis, which makes them shoot out of your body in the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
The Thumerian Elder can create them when he goes into his second phase and starts using fire attacks. He'll stick his staff in the ground and then the spear will shoot out at the ground upward at you.
Mm-hmm.
And Queen Yarnum can shoot them at you as projectiles, and she can also summon them out of the ground like the Elder does.
Mm-hmm.
And not the same spear, but the cramped caskets will spit things at you, but those are not spears made of. Those are spears made of blood, but they're not the same spear design. And if you wander
Mm-hmm.
around the Nightmare of Mensis, you'll see that a lot of the corpses have those spears sticking out of them. The idea being that they died by being frenzied by the brain. So I guess their
Mm-hmm.
blood just coagulated when it was like that. And yeah, that halberd spear thing. That's actually like it's really really because I've like looked at the files and everything. That is like one of the first things they did was that sort of halberd spear thing, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like really early on. It's in all of the test maps, but it's like they never explain what it's supposed to be, or like they never really hint at anything significant about it other than that it appears in a bunch of places. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's some kind of like Thumerian thing, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And another thing.
Blum, 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 blum,
Yes, that's the other thing. Could you
blum,
elaborate?
blum. Well, unlike other enemies in Bloodborne, the Winter Lanterns have a beautiful singing voice.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you tell that one is nearby without seeing it, because you can hear it go blum, 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 blum.
Oh, so what's happening? Okay, I get it, Richie. You know what's happening is that so
Yeah,
the Winter Lanterns think they're alone, right? So they're just
yeah,
walking around, singing,
yeah,
humming,
yeah,
kind of like, when you sing in the shower or something. And then they see that somebody's looking at them and they get really shy and embarrassed and
yeah.
they're like, oh my God, they heard me sing.
Oh yeah, and the frenzy attack is them blushing.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
they don't actually, they don't actually mean to kill you. They just get a little anxious and confused and they're just so like outer worldly and powerful.
yeah. Oh,
Give you
yeah,
frenzy or bite you with their many
yeah, yeah.
under brain mouths.
That's the technical term.
Speaking of those mouths, like what are they?
Well, we don't know, but like something that we've brought up a few times is that like vermin rest in the throats of creatures.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's roughly where the throat is, and they seem to like be hungry for blood. And the patients in the research hall, we talked about them, like they have tentacles, but the tentacles are coming out of the throat, they're not coming out of the face, like with a brain sucker. So it's kind of like, I mean, the thing about Winter Lanterns is we don't ever see them outside of the nightmare. So it's not like with a lot of things, it's not clear if this was ever like a physical thing or if this is some sort of like manifestation of something else. I think you have to assume it's that they're like a weird manifestation of something. They're not actually real. So they're just, I mean, they're not like, there wasn't really a Winter Lantern that got stuck in the nightmare. It's like a,
Mm-hmm.
some sort of like the, like we've talked about how Ludwig or like Lawrence, how like
Mm-hmm.
Lawrence like pretty much definitely didn't look like he does in the nightmare, and Ludwig probably didn't, and like Maria is alive in the nightmare.
Ludwig is sketchy. You don't know what he did or did not look like in the
He's
real
wandering
world.
around with a pair of sunglasses and like his collar's turned up.
You mentioned their
Yeah.
singing, and
Blum, 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 blum.
and somebody else hums a lullaby in the game.
Yes.
Oh, who isn't?
Well, currently it's no one, but if you start fucking around with different like versions and patches, you can very, very sometimes get the doll to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's if you're just playing like a copy of the current release, this will never happen.
Hmm.
It's something you can only trigger if you have to have like played on version 1.0, saved in the Hunter's Dream,
Hmm.
then patched the game, then reloaded the save. And then even in that case, there's maybe like a 1% chance it'll happen.
Hmm.
Is that if you go up to the doll, she'll be sleeping, like she usually does. But if you kind of idle there for a while, she'll stop snoring and she'll start humming. She'll start humming a lullaby that you know because it's Russian.
Баю, баюшки, баю, не ложися на краю.
Tell us about the lullaby, then.
It's a lullaby that I guess most Russians know. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
it's basically called "Баю, баюшки, баю." It's like a lullaby, and it talks about how when you sleep, you shouldn't sleep on the edge of the bed, because then the wolf will come and he'll bite you, or something like that. I can post the exact lyrics and translation below. It's kind of like that, the one that I find weird, where it's you're singing it to a baby and they might fall from a tree or
Oh,
something.
Rockabye Baby. Yeah,
Yeah. So I guess it's
yeah,
the equivalent, but instead of like falling from a tree, a wolf will bite you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And people might know this theme because it's in Dead by Daylight.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the Huntress sings Bayo Bayo Bish Bayo.
With the huntress, what? It was very adorable. You mispronounced it, and it was the best thing ever.
The Huntress in Dead by Daylight sings Bayo Bayoshki Bayo.
By you.
Bayo.
Yeah.
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 So, so is there anything else about the winter lanterns physically that we should look at?
Not that's still in the game. They have a bunch of like unused attacks, but
Oh,
they're
well, let's
unused.
talk about that.
Okay, so one of the things about the Winter Lantern, like how they work, is there's something that a lot of people find unfair and bullshit because they just look at you and you lose 70% of your health. And you are correct. That is not how they were initially designed. What's actually happening with this is like technical discussion.
Mhm,
What's actually happening is that there's the Winter Lantern entity, and then there's another entity that is like attached to it.
mhm,
That's literally it's called Dummy Shooter because I've like looked at the code and shit. It's called Dummy Shooter, and what's happening is when you're frenzied, that's actually the Dummy Shooter. So basically, it's like Queen Yarnum and Murgo. There's this like invisible thing inside the brain. So when you walk into a certain proximity, it activates and starts shooting the frenzy at you. The frenzy's actually like it's a directional like beam. You can't see it. But that's why like if you hide behind stuff, it won't hit you. So basically, the Winter Lantern has like a frenzy turret stuck to its head, and that's because initially the Winter Lantern was like a melee enemy. It wasn't a frenzy thing. And this has been restored. Like the AI script was like reinserted, I think, or just they just changed some bytes and it started working again. It has all these unused attacks where it just whips you with its hands. Like it'll the arms it grows when it grabs you come out and it'll just like punch you or like slap you.
mhm.
It looks like if you know that gif of the cat drumming on the table.
Yes,
It looks
yeah.
like that. It's that. That's what their attacks look. It's ridiculous.
Aw.
And so there's something that like that was clearly like they were designed to be that, and they added the frenzy later on, and that's kind of why it's not terribly well implemented.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you, Richie. So now let's move on to where.
yeah.
Where are the winter lanterns?
They're only we mentioned this already, but they're only ever found in the nightmare areas.
Can you be specific in which nightmare areas?
Why certainly. There is I think there's three. in the Nightmare Frontier. Hang on. The problem is there's that like really bullshit area. I think there's only two. So the first lantern you're likely to encounter is it's the second half of the Nightmare Frontier. It's after you leave the big green swamp.
Mm-hmm.
When you round the cave and start going down the side of the cliff, there's a winter lantern there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in like the worst possible position because there's nothing for you to hide behind. So you'll probably get frenzied and die like immediately.
Mm-hmm.
There's also one in the swampy area underneath that. In the cave, if you want to go looking for like items and stuff. There's an area most people skip, but in that cave full of lumen flowers, there's another one. And you can grind them for cursed gems like early on, like they're for where you find them. It's not terrible in terms of drops. Then there's a bunch in the Nightmare of Mensis. They're on the bridge that is above the Mensis brain. They're like patrolling it, and that's kind of interesting because they kind of are the Mensis brain. Like they look the same. They have the same attacks and everything, and they're going back and forth above the brain. And there's also one that's guarding where the choir bell is. And it's patrolling. And then this is when it sort of like came together as to what they were supposed to be because we weren't sure. In the DLC, along with adding Maria, they put two of them near where Maria's Rakuyo is. So at that point, they're like explicitly linking this with Maria because previously there was like nothing to connect them to anything except the doll and the Mensis brain. It was like, what is this weird hybrid thing? But then because the DLC introduces Maria, it was also like, okay, here's where Maria put her sword, and where she left the sword, there's like two of these things have sort of like appeared. And that sort of links it back to, okay, these are like a product of what Maria went through. They've like, her trauma has sort of taken form as these things. And it's like, okay, that's...
So you touched on the why a little bit there.
Yeah.
But before we move on to the full-blown why, we're not going to talk in detail about Maria or the doll because we have talked about them in multiple podcasts in the past.
Yeah.
So if anybody wants more information on those, you can like look them up on our channel, the doll, Maria.
If you want the TLDR version, the doll is Erden.
Thank you, Richie. So, Richie.
Yes.
Could you just reiterate the connection between Winter Lanterns and Doll in main game and then Doll Maria Winter Lanterns in DLC?
Okay, yeah, because this is one of the really like confusing things in the game. So pre-DLC, we knew that Winter Lanterns were patterned after the doll. Like they have the doll's body parts and the doll's clothing. We also knew that like the doll was vampiric and had links to Canehurst because she was wearing like clothing that was close to what Canehurst people wore. And when you like offer like your echoes to the doll, it's patterned after like the way that you offer dregs to Annalise, where there's like this kneeling and then the hand goes red, and it's like you're sort of passing this thing between you, and only you're giving the doll like echoes of blood and you're giving Annalise actual blood. So the doll was always like vampiric. So when the Winter Lanterns have that attack where they're grabbing onto you and they're like biting into you, like chewing on you, it's like that's like a reflection of the doll's vampirism. Only it's becoming this like a thing that's trying to harm you. And the same goes for the frenzy blood, where like it's literally sucking blood out of you in these like spikes. So it was like before Maria, you could always go, okay, like the doll is somehow connected to Canehurst and it's kind of vampiric, and Winter Lanterns are like a like twisted version of that where they're also vampiric and they're like doing stuff with your blood. So it's like, okay, you can kind of like line it all up. Yeah, so then the DLC came out. But again, like it wasn't clear what was going on. We didn't find out anything else about the doll. We just knew that like she was made by someone and they were like very attached to her, and she was very motherly, and that was sort of it. And then the DLC came out, and the DLC said, surprise, The doll is based on a woman called Maria, who Gurman used to be in love with, and she didn't reciprocate. And she's also she was in the astral clock tower that you never go to in the waking world, but you go to like a past version of it. And um, specifically with regard to the Winter Lanterns, they put 2 Winter Lanterns in the DLC and they put them in the place where it specifically says Maria threw away her weapon when she sort of abandoned her life as a hunter and she became a healer, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And when she cast her sword into a well, that at least in the nightmare version that we get, the well that she cast that sword into kind of spawned these Winter Lanterns that are wandering around there.
Mm-hmm.
So you sort of that's their attempt to kind of tie it together to say like, okay, like when Maria threw away like who she used to be and like because of all the trauma that she went through, that sort of spontaneously generates the Winter Lanterns from that point. They're like a creation that's created from that event, like from Maria, like her because like the other thing they do with Maria is they have like when you defeat Maria, the doll responds and she says like, "Oh, I feel like something. These like I've been liberated from something. Like
Mm-hmm.
something has been lifted from me." So Maria's like essence is still felt throughout like the hunter's dream, and presumably it's felt throughout the whole nightmare. So, um, getting like the idea that like her essence sort of takes root in all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of saying like, okay, her essence created these lantern things. These monsters are like a reflection of her.
You know, now that you phrase it this way, what I think would have been cool? If after you defeat Maria, the Winter Lanterns disappear from the game.
Yeah.
I think that would have been neat, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, like, signifying that, oh, like, her spirit is free now or whatever.
Yeah. That would
Yeah.
be good.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, Richie, now that you explained all that, let me ask you more directly. Why are the Winter Lanterns?
Okay, so if you look at what they are, they're like just a mixture of everything related to Maria. So like the doll, obviously. They're the blood that Maria specifically turned her back on. Like they talk about how Maria, like, she frowned upon the use of blood weapons. So there's something about her that makes her like dislike her heritage.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the way that like they hum. We talked about like the doll used to hum,
Yeah.
doesn't anymore, but like they clearly like connected to her somehow. And it's almost like a nightmare of like what Maria was frightened of becoming, where it's like half the weird automaton doll and half the vampire.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we talked about the patience in the hall, and it's almost like, okay, the giant swollen brain is kind of like that's what she was dealing with every day, was all the patients who had the giant brains that were leaking out of their heads. So it's like,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you though, what are the Winter Lanterns doing in the Nightmare of Menses?
I have no idea. I mean, like, I guess the thing we're just gonna have to say is that like the whole Maria Winter Lantern DLC thing is like they kind of came out with that later.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not like a cohesive explanation of what, because if it was very specifically meant to be a Maria thing and Maria was always meant to be there, you wouldn't see them in Mensis. You would see them in like the Hamlet and the research hall, like in the dream or something, and they don't. The best, like, if you have to explain it, would be to say that, like, okay, Mikolash is beckoning Kos.
Mm-hmm.
So he's calling out to Kos, and, like, Maria feels all this guilt over Kos, and she may have been, like, directly involved in killing Kos. So it's like they're sort of drawn to him.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And it's near the fishing hamlet's beneath
Mm-hmm.
the nightmare of Mensis. So you can imagine, okay, like they're maybe like reaching upward.
Mm-hmm.
And like so the frontier is below Mensis as well. So if you imagine like they're just sort of going upward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. because he's like calling on things from the hamlet where he is.
I just had a scary vision. So imagine you're Mikolash and you're like, Cause, come on, Cause, grant me eyes, Cause. But then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, these winter lanterns start crawling up the building to get to him.
Yeah.
And just like, that's so terrifying. And it's like, no, Mikolash, stop. The winter lanterns are coming.
It's a good thing he's hiding in the library. Oh, that's what it is. It's his nightmare because it's like, where do you work out? At the library, and it's a giant brain.
All right, Richie, do the outro.
That was What Where Why Enemies of Bloodborne episode 50. The gold anniversary. We didn't talk about the name Winter Lantern.
Oh my god! Yeah, Winter Lantern, Richie,
Okay.
let's go. We only have 3 minutes left because the theme is only 3 minutes long and we're already in the outro.
Okay, so the name Winter Lantern is the English name. The Japanese name is Hozuki, which means Winter Lantern. There's a specific festival during winter in which you use lanterns, right? But what it's actually referring to, I'm pretty sure, is that there's a flower called Hozuki flower. And the Hozuki flower is called that because it kind of looks like a lantern. It's got like a central, like the seeds are in the middle, and then the flower, the petals kind of grow around it. So it's like there's like this like spherical thing with like the seeds in the middle. So it kind of looks like a burning lantern. And I'm pretty sure it's called that because like all the great ones, the names seem to just be a description of them because we don't know their true, apart from maybe Erden, we don't know their true names. We just see like here's a description of them. So like Amygdala is like an almond, and like the Koz is like a ghost. Koz is like Gos in Japanese, so it's like Koz is a ghost, and Flora is flowers. Yeah, Erden is an Odeon. Like it's all like connected. So the head of the Winter Lantern looks a lot like a Hozuki flower.
Okay.
So I'm pretty sure like they just called it that because they saw this giant like monstrosity with the Hozuki flower shaped head, and like okay, it's called that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right, yay, we made it right before the outro song ends. Thank you, Richie.
Thank you, Sen.
Thanks for watching, everyone. See y'all next time.
Yay.